Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. Danny Fenton was an animated superhero cartoon that aired on Nickelodeon from 2004 to 2007. The show is about teenager Danny Fenton, who gains the ability to turn into a ghost and use supernatural abilities. Each episode would have Danny face off against a different ghost, who each had their own unique gimmick, all while trying to keep his alter ego a secret from his ghost hunter parents. The show is a massive hit, having a good balance between action and humor, making it a staple of Nickelodeon's IPs, and still has a cult following to this day. During the show's second season in 2005, a 2-episode special was going to be aired called The Ultimate Enemy. The episode would have Danny face off against Danny Fenton, Danny's future self who became evil following the death of his family. Danny Fenton was portrayed as being one of the most powerful enemies Danny has ever faced, with a voice far too sexy for a cartoon character.
You know, if I had an ounce of humanity left in me, this would be a very touching little reunion. But of course I surrendered my human half a long time ago.
Anyway, in addition to Danny would also need to fight a ghost called Clockwork, as both he and future versions of Danny's rogues gallery would try to go back in time to take Danny out so he can't become the menace he does in the future. To promote this special, Nickelodeon released Danny Fenton, The Ultimate Enemy, exclusive to the Gameboy Advance. The game would act as a tie-in, allowing players to play through the events of the episode. But was it the ultimate game for Danny Fenton fans? Let's turn the page to Danny Fenton, The Ultimate Enemy, for the Game Boy Advance. Danny Fenton, The Ultimate Enemy is a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you, of course, get to play as the titular Danny Fenton and punch your way through waves of enemy ghosts and progress through each stage. The game's story is a watered-down retelling of the Ultimate Enemy episode. We actually start the game as Danny Fenton, 10 years in the future, showing him tearing his way through some of the last bit of resistance left on the planet. This is an excellent opening, honestly. Throughout the game, as you play as Danny, you'll slowly acquire more abilities. But since Dan is from 10 years in the future, you start off with every upgrade, giving you a taste of the full power you'll acquire by the end of the game. Plus, it's just cool to get a chance to play as Danny's dark doppelganger. Following the tutorial stage, we go back to the present, where we start the game proper as Danny. As Danny, you can attack by pressing B, which will form a short combo string, and destroying objects can sometimes yield ghost hunting equipment, which can use to take out ghosts. Every now and again you'll encounter some stronger enemies, which, if defeated, will drop what I assume is ectoplasm onto the ground. By pressing the right shoulder button, you can use the Fenton thermos to pick up these bits of ectoplasm. Green restores health, while purple raises a green meter underneath your health, which lets you use Danny's ghost powers. By holding the left shoulder button, you can cycle through Danny's abilities, and use what I'll just refer to as the ghost meter to perform a few skills, such as Danny's plasma blast and turning intangible, making you invincible for a short period of time. A neat mechanic is that you can press the select button to switch between Danny's human and ghost forms. While human, Danny can't attack at all and is completely defenseless. However, his ghost meter will automatically fill up, a process much faster than waiting for enemies to drop ectoplasm. So it creates a bit of a risk-reward system, where if you feel like you want some meter during a fight, you can switch back to human form and avoid getting hit for a bit before changing back to ghost. It's a clever use of Danny's existing abilities. Something a little frustrating is that Ultimate Enemy has zero tutorial. So if you were like me and bought the game used and without an instruction manual, be prepared to figure out everything on your own. Ultimate Enemy isn't a particularly complex game. You'll be able to intuit most things on your own. But there were a couple things I needed to progress that took me a bit to figure out. In the early game, you'll run into walls that you can only pass through using Danny's intangibility. Players may not know that they even need to do this. Or hell, they may not have even known to hold the shoulder button to cycle through abilities to find out intangibility even exists. Plus, these walls only appear as an obstacle in this one stage. After this, you never see them again, making me question what the point of them was to begin with. Meanwhile, there are some levels which requires the player to jump over some bottomless pits. You can jump over them with some very good timing, but what the game actually wants you to do is to use Danny's flight. To trigger this, you need to jump and then while in the air, press jump again while holding up. A tutorial would have been really useful in letting me know I could do this, and I only even remembered this was possible from my first playthrough of this game over a decade ago. Much like phasing through walls, Danny's flight is really only used for this one obstacle, as there's no benefit to flight outside of platforming, and Danny's attack while airborne is borderline useless due to its pitiful range. Ultimate Enemy's combat is decently fun. Making use of Danny's punches and plasma attacks on a variety of ghosts can be enjoyable. Unfortunately, that's really all there is to this game. You just advance forward, punch out ghosts, move forward, punch more ghosts, etc. Ultimate Enemy is lacking heavily in variety, and what's on offer gets old really fast. Outside of punching ghosts, there are two flying sections where the game briefly becomes a side-scrolling shooter. These moments were refreshing, and I wish there were more little gameplay changes like this. But unfortunately, these stages are really short-lived, and then it's right back to the same combat. As you progress through each stage, you'll get experience and be able to level up Danny. Leveling up grants you access to new abilities, like more attacks in your basic combo and new plasma abilities, which does a little bit to alleviate the repetitiveness, but they only do so much. Also, having an experience system in a side-scrolling beat-em-up is rather bizarre, especially since you can't progress through the stage without first defeating all the enemies anyways, and you can't replay stages until you beat the game for the first time. It feels pretty pointless. As you progress through the story, you'll have to face off against the occasional boss, and my god, these boss fights are an absolute joke. Aside from Skulltech 9.9 and Clockwork, each boss and Ultimate Enemy has a brief moment of being stunned after being attacked before they start attacking back. What this means is you can very easily stun lock every boss by executing 2 punches, pausing, doing 2 punches again, rinse and repeat until their ghost is defeated. This is even the case for the final boss. There's no challenge here, and these bosses are more well-designed punching bags than anything resembling a threat. Presentation-wise, I'm not a huge fan of Ultimate Enemy either visually or audibly. Visually, the game tries its best to emulate the art style of the show. I see what they're going for, but the show they're trying to replicate has a very minimal use of shading. Translated into sprite form, it makes the world seem very flat and uninteresting, not to mention just very pixelated. It's fine, just not great. The music, however, is pretty bad in my opinion. The game tries to make the music sound really grand and epic, but the way it comes out has everything just sound really harsh on the ears, with tracks feeling like they just drone on. A couple of the boss themes were okay, but for the most part I much prefer to play this game with the volume completely off. The game as a whole is beatable in just under an hour. For the record, the original special was 48 minutes in length, meaning the game is only 12 minutes longer than just sitting down and watching the episode it's based on. That said, Ultimate Enemy does have a post-game of sorts. After defeating his future self, Danny is informed by the ghost Clockwork that the future is still unchanged. Clockwork sends Danny back in time to investigate what causes him to still become evil. What this really comes down to is you unlock a stage select and need to play through the entire game over again. Riveting. This time, each stage has 3 optional missions for the player to complete, but if you get anything from doing them, I sure didn't notice. So if you don't care to do these missions, you're really just doing a second playthrough of the game. One neat thing though is that this mission mode adds a couple new boss fights that are unrelated to the story. All these bosses are members of Danny's Rogues Gallery, meaning you'll get the opportunity to fight the likes of Ember, the Box Ghost, and Technus. I admit, it's cool that you can fight a bunch of Danny's iconic enemies, even though they weren't part of the original story. Or rather, it would be cool if they didn't become reduced to the same stun-locked pushovers the other bosses were. Seriously, this is just embarrassing and takes away from what otherwise would be some really cool additions. Anyways, you play through the story again and reach the game's true final boss, Vlad Masters. For those not in the know, Vlad Masters was, for all intents and purposes, Danny's archenemy in the cartoon, with Vlad being a half-ghost just like Danny. Vlad reveals Dan spoke with him as insurance in case Dan was defeated, and Vlad plans on performing the same acts which make Danny turn evil in the future. I find it hilarious that the one sliver of original story exclusive to this game makes absolutely no sense. During the story, we see Vlad. Danny becoming evil results in the loss of Vlad's ghost form and completely ruins his life. That's also not to mention that Danny's mom, Madeline, dies in this future, which Vlad wouldn't want because basically his entire motivation in the cartoon was trying to win over her affection. Why on earth would Vlad want to make sure this future happens? It's complete nonsense. Whatever, you beat Vlad and there you go. That's the true end of Ultimate Enemy, with the entire game being completable in less than 2 hours. By the time you reach Vlad, you will have easily reached max level with Danny. So unless you feel like completing all the optional missions, there's not really any reason to replay any of the stages. Outside of the main levels, Ultimate Enemy has a few extras. First, you can look at the bios for every ghost enemy in the game. For those who aren't familiar with Danny's Rogues Gallery, the description of the bosses are serviceable, if lacking a bit in creativity. But you also get descriptions for the basic enemies as well, and seriously, what even are these descriptions? This sack of goo is gross. Seriously, watch out for this. Well, I'm enlightened. Guys, no one was forcing you to put these bios in the game. If this was the effort you were going to put in to describe each ghost, you really could have used your resources elsewhere. The game also has a few minigames you can play, but to unlock them you need to input some passwords. Once you do, the minigames will be unlocked in the BK Promotions menu. I'm curious why this menu is called BK Promotions. I thought maybe there was some sort of partnership between Nickelodeon and Burger King, and by purchasing the kids meal you would get a password for one of these minigames. But after doing some digging, I couldn't find anything to support my theory, so I guess it'll just be left a mystery. Anyways, inputting these passwords will unlock 4 minigames. The fourth one, Ghost Hide and Seek, just triggers the chance for a hidden ghost to appear in a level. But strangely, I already encountered a few of these ghosts during my first playthrough, without activating Ghost Hide and Seek. So does this just increase the chance of a hidden ghost appearing? I don't really know what the point of this is, and as far as I'm aware, you get nothing for defeating these ghosts, so it doesn't really matter. The other minigames are fine. They're nothing incredible or addicting, but they offer some nice distractions if you want to break from the main stages. Additionally, by putting in the password Rush, you unlock a boss rush mode. You can even play as Dan during this mode, which is pretty neat, but at the end of the day, it's still fighting the game's bosses, and okay, you get the idea at this point. Still, extra modes aren't a bad thing. If you did somehow get a kick out of the boss fights, or just wanted to play as Dan outside of the introductory stage, then hey, here you go. Danny Phantom: The Ultimate Enemy is a pretty basic and forgettable adventure. The game does nothing all that wrong, it's structured fine and everything for the most part works, but the entire time I was playing, my face was blank and expressionless. There's just nothing all that exciting on offer here. If you're a Danny Phantom fan and you really want to play a video game featuring the titular Ghost Boy, then what's here is serviceable enough. I just hardly see the point in playing the game when you can watch the original episode the game is based on and likely have a better experience, and one that lasts just as long. The Ultimate Enemy will have the honor of taking the number 28 spot at the very bottom of our ranking. It is equally as uninteresting as Bionicle, but with Bionicle, there were at least a handful of moments where I could feel a slight smile on my face, as opposed to my deadpan playthrough of Ultimate Enemy. Not a bad game, but likely one I'll have completely forgotten about by the time this video is uploaded. Though the game was underwhelming, I'm actually grateful this one was chosen after Tales of Vesperia, as coming off of a bigger video like that, it was nice to have something simpler. Next time, we'll be setting our sights on the world's most way past cool hedgehog, Sonic. So far we've only discussed a 2D title, but this go around we'll be looking at one of the Blue Blur's 3D entries. Please look forward to that. In the meanwhile, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.